Maybe this time's different, but to me, we haven't seen the washout yet. You still have, you go on crypto Twitter, people are just as bullish as they were at 69,000.
In today's video, Chief Market Strategist of InTheMoneyStocks.com Gareth Soloway tells us all about his latest analysis of the charts as well as his predictions and price targets for Bitcoin and Ethereum. He believes that we could possibly see Bitcoin's low in the coming months. Soloway shares his opinion regarding high inflation rates, the stock market, the crypto market, and the Fed.
I really could see the narrative both ways. So maybe it pops up and then rolls over into a recession. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think one of the interesting things that we could recognize is that globally, the economic data has been ridiculously bad, right? I mean, Germany recently, the UK with inflation, Japan with inflation. We know China's struggling, their economy's struggling. And so what's kind of intriguing to me is that the dollar's not getting a bigger bid, considering that the economic data here has been really actually pretty good comparatively. So it's almost like, okay, so if that's not giving the dollar a bid, does that potentially mean that when the US economy starts to weaken, which, whether it's in 3 months, 6 months, a year, at some point it will, does that then mean, do we have a bigger rollover? And again, it is kind of interesting with the chatter about de-dollarization. Janet Yellen recently saying that, people should actually diversify away from US dollars a little bit because it probably won't be the only currency out there. So yeah, it's kind of interesting because again, the economic data globally has been really, really weak. You'd assume the dollar would be ripping right now.
Right. Yeah, it hasn't so far.
Yeah, although I will say this is that we know the US dollar does well when there's panic, right?
Do you think that could lead to any type of resurgence in inflation?
Yeah, so one of the things that's kind of caught my eye with that thought process, and it is something that's kind of perking my ears up a little bit, is that we've seen, prices continually decline. But now over the last 6 months or 8 months, the stock market has started to reaccelerate to the upside. We know that we're not that far off of the all-time highs now. And, tech stocks are going nuts. We've seen all that. And then also you can look at like Japan's recent data on inflation, and that started to almost uptick a little bit, as well as the UK. So it seems like there's little pockets around the globe where you're starting to see that. And it does make me wonder with the stock market going up. In fact, the other thing to mention too is housing has started to uptick a little bit again as well. And again, certainly we did not have you wouldn't call what happened in housing a correction. I think maybe prices went down 5%. Turning our attention to crypto, sure, it's just short-term trades. I got a little Matic right now, a little Cardano, kind of same thing where these are just, you can see with Matic here, it's peaking above this same resistance line. And then there's a target here. You have this down sloping trend line here and this flat one right here. So upside for me, 74 cents. But again, from the lows, that's actually a really good move. That's a 50% move off the lows. But in the scheme of what this has done, this is still it's gotten crushed. And I think investors, there's this common kind of thought process with investors where it's like the cheaper it is, the better value it must be. And I do think people need to recognize that that's not always the case. You can play them for bounces, but valuation will have to figure itself out as we get regulation in here. And to be honest, it's very hard to figure out what the valuation of a Matic or a Cardano would be. If I flip just to the Cardano chart, I'll show you guys here. Bear with me as I bring that up. So basically, Cardano still hasn't broken out. Matic's starting to peak above the level here. But you can see that, again, Cardano is still up into this resistance, which is right around 30 cents. If it gets through 30 cents, you should head to about 33 cents, that longer-term down-sloping trend line. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to view. And again, I'm a much shorter-term trader, so just kind of taking advantage of these little moves and so forth.
But do you think that it's worthwhile to take note of this pullback?
Yeah, I mean, for me at least, to be honest, I think Bitcoin dominance is still going higher. I know you're in the same thought process of that. And I think what investors need to recognize is that last week we got the SEC to say that the Bitcoin ETF filings for the spot were inadequate. And so just naturally, that's going to make Bitcoin investors a little bit more hesitant. And then I also think you have a lot of speculation. I mean, just going back to the stock market and tying the stock market in right now, the stock market has been so strong, like every day floating up, that eventually what people do is when everything, like you're looking at some of these stocks that have just gone parabolic, they start to look for what hasn't run. And so I think there's just this natural thing of saying, oh, well, these altcoins are so low, I'm just going to give it a shot. which just creates that little bit of a bounce. So you have the negative of Bitcoin with the SEC, even though it wasn't that big of a deal, saying that the ETFs were inadequate. And then you have this kind of risk on kind of thought process where you're then pushing the alts up a little bit. So at least for me, that's kind of where I am at.
From a technical perspective, what are you looking at with Litecoin USD?
Yeah, so with Litecoin, I mean, amazing move, and again, I think partially it's the halving, and then also partially it's probably one of the few other coins that's classified in the Bitcoin realm of not being a security, but in that kind of same commodity-ish area. In terms of the move up, this is the daily chart, and we can see it went right up into this resistance level, which is a pivot from right here. For one, I think also, let me just see here. I want to draw another trend line from this low here to this high. Yeah, you can see. So there's a lot of a confluence of resistance levels up in this 112 level. So once you make a move like this for a technical trader, you never want to chase it, number one. Number two, it needs to digest the move. So you're essentially looking for a bullish consolidation move, which would be kind of like a 45 to 90 degree angle. Kind of like what we were talking about with Bitcoin dominance maybe happening, that consolidation where it had a big run. Now it needs to kind of digest the move before it can make that next move up. So amazing move on Litecoin. I mean, I don't know if you have any insights into that. Like would this be something that you would be a buyer on a pullback, or you're kind of like, nah, I'm sticking to Bitcoin, Ethereum, and these? I mean, it's pretty remarkable, the crypto sentiment right now, specifically in regards to Bitcoin. It seems like anyone that was on the alt train has now moved into the Bitcoin train, and it's pretty wild out there right now in terms of bullish sentiment. And I would say, so I see a question here about, I talked previously, over the last year, that Bitcoin could potentially decline by as much as 85%. That data point came from past cycles about how much it dropped in each of the past cycles. It was somewhere around that. I actually think that it also has to do with how much of a decline we saw in Amazon. If this was the .com bubble bursting in crypto, it was also looking at Amazon as being kind of the child of the .com bubble, and Bitcoin obviously being the one for crypto. And so if you look back at Amazon back in 01, it bottomed out down about 85+% when all was said and done. Now, I do think that some of the positives like regulation and stuff like that, and money flowing into Bitcoin as if we get a spot ETF, could adjust that. But for me, it's just, it doesn't seem like we've had, to me, we never had the flush out in crypto. And granted, that could be more in the alts, but bear markets notoriously get people to throw in the towel. We saw it in 2017, going into 18 and 19. I still remember so vividly, and I follow, I watch CNBC as I'm stock trading and stuff like that. And I still remember 2017, the ticker of Bitcoin was at the bottom. They always talked about it. And then by 2018 into mid to late, they removed the ticker and didn't say a word. And at that point, you had Bitcoin below 10K, it was in the 76543 level. And it just was like, no one even, people were questioning whether it would survive. And maybe this time's different, but to me, we haven't seen the washout yet. You still have, you go on crypto Twitter, people are just as bullish as they were at 69,000.
Yeah. What are you looking at with the S&P?
Yeah, I mean, the divergences are shocking, actually, how many different divergences we're seeing. Just based on purely the S&P chart, what we have here is, you could see this upsloping trend line that actually goes all the way back to the COVID low. So if you take that low and you run it right through here to these highs, and it matches basically perfectly with these highs, we actually kissed that high right here before the latest pullback in the S&P, which was about a one week long pullback. And then what we're seeing here is we're rising again towards that same trend line. So I would expect that trend line, if we hit it, let's say later this week, it's not that much higher. I think it's about 20 to 30 points higher on the S&P 500. That'll be your next big resistance level. But again, for me, it's kind of looking at this, and I don't know if you have a chart on this, and maybe I should have given you a heads up, but I was wondering if you had the S&P 500 minus the top 7, the Googles, the Apples, the Microsofts, the Nvidias, and I would just be fascinating to look at this year. What's the actual return on the S&P if you take out 7 stocks? And I could be wrong on this, but I think the return is probably in the range of 3%.